Let's take a look at how we can create a pivot table. A pivot table is an automated report feature that lives within the Excel software. So the first thing we want to do with a pivot table is we want to select the data that we're looking to summarize. Now, I cannot emphasize enough that your arrow key and keyboard shortcuts are going to be critical here. So the first thing to note is I have a data set here that includes order ID, category, city, country. You can see me kind of scrolling from left to right. I'm not going to list every single field in this video, but part of your work is to understand or at least scan the fields that you're working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my Shift, Command, arrow key, left to right, and then also down. Now, what I've just done is I've selected this entire data set all the way from row 2, or row 1 really, all the way down to row 3,313. So this is selecting my data set once I am familiar with my data set. Now, once I select the data set, I can create my pivot table. To create the pivot table, I'm going to come up to my data menu option, and I'm going to say summarize with pivot table. And now I open up this pivot table menu dialog box. Now here's what I want you to do. You can create a pivot table in a new worksheet, or you can create it in an existing worksheet. I'm going to do it in an existing worksheet because I want to have all of my work visible in one tab. So I'm going to click existing worksheet, and now I'm going to click on the little worksheet icon, and I'm going to come back over here and layer it in row 17. So I'm going to visually make it below my workspace here, and then I'm going to click OK. So now what you can see is I now have this new space in my worksheet. You can see a little bit of text and a couple icons here. This is an automated pivot table, the start to one at least. And I get these instructions to build a report, choose fields from the pivot table field list. This is the pivot table field list. Now, I encourage you to kind of play around with this, check out how it works. I'm going to show you how to create this particular pivot table in this video. So, but I do encourage you to kind of explore, let your curiosity guide you, take your time with this exercise. So if you notice, I have months, I have profit ratio, and I'm filtering by region, okay? So I'm gonna need to note that I need a region field, I'm gonna need a date field, and I'm also gonna need profit ratio. So if I come back over here, let me choose the 3 fields that I just noted that I needed. So let me choose region, profit ratio, and then I've also got a order date. So that's the date that I'm going to need. Now, I should note, I'm giving you these fields in part to make your analysis of the data a little bit easier. Now let's briefly go over, now that we have some fields to look at, what is happening over here on the pivot table field list. So what Excel does is it provides this report writer in a visual format. Now I can create a pivot table that looks, and I'm going to ask you to look at the report over here and then the field list over here. If I want to filter by region, I can take my region field and I can drag and drop it to region, and you'll notice I now get a region filter over here. Okay, and I can filter by, I think it was east that I wanted. So I can simply sort of click and drag and drop. So Excel is making all of this very accessible using my mouse. So again, this is a understanding how to manipulate the software and the environment that you're in. That's one of the challenges here and part of the skill set that you're building. Now, if you notice, I just selected East and then I clicked outside of my pivot table report, and I lost my pivot table list. To get it back, I simply click back into the pivot table. If we click outside, it's going to take it away because it assumes that we're done working in it. Now, I don't quite have my list the way, or my report the way I want it. Let's click back over to the sample solution. Now I have my region, but what I don't have are my month and profit ratios. So let's create that. Now, I'm going to want to take my order data. This is my date. So I'm going to want to click my date and make it my rows. And then if you notice, I have a count of profit ratios. What I really want here is I'm going to choose the average by month. So I'm starting to get to where I need to with respect to this pivot table report, although notice how my pivot table report here is much, much longer than the solution that I provided you. I've got only 12 months here, yet over here I have a row for every single date. Well, here's one of the really powerful things about the pivot table, among other things that we're looking at. If I right-click on the pivot table, I get all these various options to manipulate the pivot table data. Now I'm going to choose group here, and what I want to do is I want to group this data by months. I don't want daily profit ratio data. I want it summarized by month, and now I have a monthly average. And the final thing I need to do here is I need to create percentages. So now I have my pivot table and my table. Now I'm ready to actually create a chart off of this, and I'll have that in a separate video.